live, Sim?
I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna steal Ron's mic for 2 seconds. Moving the
Stanley?
the emotional. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our community forum with our police chief candidates. There will be 3 separate forums tonight, and although I am here, I am not going to be moderating the session as the city manager. We've brought in Dr. Sim Covington, who is going to help assist with this, and who I am very grateful for. He has spent all day with our candidates.
And loved it.
And loved it.
Correct.
Great. Prior to coming here, each candidate also met with the police department, and so they have spent an hour, each of them, so 3 hours, Dr. Covington's time there, meeting with our police department. We do have overflow, and Erica will show everyone where that is, so there's additional rooms that we can help take people into. I appreciate you all being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Sim,
Thank you very
and
much.
you will give everyone the lay of the land.
You got it.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Dr. Sim Covington. Before we get started, it has been requested that I politely just go over some housekeeping rules. So it is politely requested that all persons attending this evening's forum adhere to the following standards of conduct: that we treat everyone with courtesy, we operate with dignity and respect when listening to others, we exercise self-control and avoid threats of violence and loud, insulting, demeaning, or offensive communications. We give open-minded considerations to all viewpoints. We focus on the issues and avoid personalizing the discussion. We allow others to speak without intimidation or interruption. We embrace respectful disagreement and dissent as democratic rights that are inherent components of an inclusive process and tools for forging sound decisions. So once again, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. How you doing?
Doing great.
Good. Just for clarification, when I ask the first question, if you can please make sure that you state your full name, okay?
Yes.
So can you please tell us about yourself and why you believe you would make a good chief of police for the city of Geneva? What exactly is your vision when it comes to serving in this critical role?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ron Eveland, and I was born and raised here in the city of Geneva. I'm very proud to be a 4th-generation police officer. Moreover, I'm proud to be a 3rd-generation Geneva police officer. I graduated from Geneva High School in 2005. My father was a Geneva police officer, and my mother was a nurse. When I was going through high school, I watched my parents struggle financially to put my older brother through college. It was because of that I decided to make the decision to enlist in the Air Force. I served in the Air Force for 6 years. My first duty station was at Osan Air Base in South Korea, followed by South Carolina. My title was a weapons systems specialist. I worked on the F-16 fighter jets. After I separated the military in 2011 as a staff sergeant, I decided to pursue my dreams of being a law enforcement officer. I attended college at Finger Lakes Community College, and then I was enrolled at Keuka College when I was ultimately hired by the New York State Park Police. Some people might not know what the Park Police does. They're kind of like a freelance state police, but we have an emphasis on the park systems, the waterways, and the snowmobile trails in New York State. I was first stationed in Alexandria Bay, New York, where I worked primarily out of Jefferson, St. Lawrence, and Lewis County. After about a year, I decided to make the transfer. I wanted to come back home. So I transferred. I worked out of Ithaca, New York, with the Park Police still, and I spanned across 10 different counties. It was here I did a little reflection. I realized I was missing something, and that was that community involvement. I reached out to Lieutenant Eric Kike, and within 4 weeks, I transferred to the Geneva Police Department in 2015. It has been a great honor to work here for the Geneva Police Department. Since my time here, I was primarily assigned a night shift, and I was promoted to sergeant in September 2022, ultimately the lieutenant spot in August of 2023. We were met with some very unexpected events in January of 2024 following the administrative leave of Chief Colton. It was at this time I was brought into an empty, dark office and was told I was going to be the acting chief with no guidance and no turnover. The reasons that I want to be the next chief of police, I can confidently say that there's no person down there at that department that has more passion or love for this community and also for the police department in a whole. some of my visions. I can probably expand on this quite a lot, more so than
That's
earlier.
all right. That's what we're here for.
I've got a lot of goals, and I have a long vision with the police department. I'm very proud that this past year we were able to put 4 recruits in the police academy. We are currently fully staffed at the police officer level. I do have some goals. I would like to make a sergeant promotion. We have not had 6 sergeants in the last, since 2019 or so. I made a commitment to Superintendent Bo Wright and the city school district that we're going to have 2 SROs this upcoming year. We have a drug problem in the city of Geneva. We are aware of that. We're trying to combat that. We haven't had a narcotics officer in assisting the drug enforcement unit since 2017, 2018. This is something I want to bring back as well.
Kudos. Very quickly, you'll see on both screens here we have something called Scan Me. That's for smartphones. That's an opportunity for you to participate in the survey after the end of the session here. In times of crisis, communication skills are paramount to effective crisis management. Therefore, what skills and best practices have you utilized and can bring to the role of Chief of Police?
Well, I think personal and professional experience is really what set me up for that. I've dealt with a lot of personal stress in my life. I recently lost my father this past June. I was by his bedside, and I was the one who had to call the funeral home and make those conversations and that plan moving. Professionally, I've worked in Geneva for 9 years. I have unfortunately responded to many shootings, many fatals, many stabbings, overdose fatalities, children that have passed away, extremely stressful and critical incidences. I've always been able to maintain my composure under stressful situations and have clear and calm thoughts and just a wide vision of what we need to do to get the job done.
With social justice and activism continuing to be an area of concern across the country, what systems do you believe are needed in order to support matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what practices do you hope to incorporate to combat bias inside and outside the Geneva Police Department?
I think a lot of this focuses on training. The Geneva Police Department, we have a very strict equitable policing policy, 0 tolerance. And I think that the training's important. In 2019, we did a fair and impartial policing training department-wide. And in 2021, we did an implicit bias training. It was actually hosted by Dr. Sim Covington.
That's bias. That's bias.
But I think one of the most enlightening thing that I took away from that is Dr. Sim, stressed that everybody has some sort of bias, and that is true. You might not even know what your bias is, but everybody has it. And I think it's important that when you do recognize it, you're able to not act on that and just focus on that.
Kudos. Can you please describe your leadership style? How would you promote a professional image of the Geneva Police Department to the greater community? And what's your experience managing dissension or morale issues within the department?
Well, my leadership style, I'm very fair, I'm well-balanced, and I'm decisive. I think my 2 strongest qualities is I'm humble and I'm approachable. The officers under me know that they can come to me with questions, concerns, or even ideas. When I make a decision, I don't just make it based on what I want or what I think is good for the department. I like getting community feedback. I like getting departmental feedback. Ultimately, it is going to be, my decision, unfortunately, sometimes. But I do like to get the best opinions out there. And can you just repeat the second part of that question, sir?
Absolutely. What is your experience managing dissension or morale issues within the department?
I've got a lot of experience with that. I worked here in the Geneva Police Department 2020 when we had the protests at the front of the PD. There's a lot of morale issues. There's a lot of stress coming into work. And most recently, like I spoke about in January, there is a lot of stress and a lot of uncertainty in the department having the chief of police being placed on an administrative lead. I think a lot of it was my leadership being open, communicative, and reassuring our members of the department that operationally everything is okay. We're still going to do the same police service that we do every single day. And I think that constant reassurance really helped keep morale where it was and then to increase afterwards.
Promoting community standards, and particularly civility, continues to be important when it comes to public safety. As Chief of Police, how would you demonstrate leadership in supporting and advancing this standard?
Well, I think we have a great community policing model here at the Geneva Police Department. We're very active in our city school district. We're adding a second SRO. Me personally, I teach impaired driving and health class every quarter. I've been doing that for 4 years. I also go and teach in the driver's ed program. I was very active, still am active in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. It's called Bigs and Blue, Bridging the Gap. I think being active in our community is extremely paramount. And can you just repeat that one more time, Dr. Sun?
Absolutely. Promoting community standards and in particular civility continues to be important when it comes to public safety. As Chief of Police, how would you demonstrate leadership in supporting and advancing this standard?
Yeah, so just to expand on what I said, I think it's also very important to be transparent with the public, have that open communication, and also accountability.
As the principal individual overseeing safety and security for the City of Geneva, what do you consider to be the most effective practices to ensure a proper balance between individual rights and public safety? What systems will you put in place for fair and principled policing?
Well, I think when you focus on constitutional rights and public safety, they kind of run parallel. They're both obviously extremely important. We want to focus, that's our main job, is public safety, right? You know, we're public servants, but not infringing on the individual's rights as well is paramount. It's very common right now to see First Amendment auditors and things like that with these new the increase in technology with phones, people expressing their freedom of press. I think it's very important that the law enforcement officers are trained properly on people's First Amendment rights specifically, so that way no rights are infringed upon.
For the good of the order, are there any final thoughts you would like to share with the audience regarding your candidacy for Chief of Police for the City of Geneva? Many times when people interview, and after the interview they go home and they're like, oh man, I forgot to say this, I forgot to say that, right? Now you have an open forum. What's something that you want to make sure that the citizens of Geneva know when it comes to your candidacy?
I think I would just like to say that, you know, almost 10 years ago I worked for a state agency, had a lot of career advancements, a lot of possibilities. I worked on a boat and a snowmobile. It was a pretty nice job. I made that decision to come here. I did that because I am dedicated here and I wanted to make this department and this community better. I have the experience of working in almost every facet of this department when it comes to evidence, scheduling, payroll, you know, trying to think of how I can expand on that. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, I got the camera looking right at me, so I blame that.
And you're doing great. You're doing fine. Go ahead.
You know, I do bring two other things to the table that no one else, I think, is able to right now, at least with the current candidates, is one, I have this intimate knowledge of this department. We're small. You know, we're not a 500-man or 1,000-man department. I understand and I know the officers' strengths. I know their weaknesses. And I think right now, more so than ever, this department needs some stability. You look at what's happened to us in the last 2 years, not all negative, but we have gone through a couple 20-year sergeants due to retirement. We're not seeing anybody stay past 20 years anymore. We have gone through 2 police lieutenants. We have gone through 2 chiefs of police. We need some stability, and I am not retiring for another 9 years, if not longer. So that is one thing. I'm very appreciative for everybody coming out to, this evening, and I'm excited to be afforded this opportunity.
Thank you very much. At this time, we do have a podium over here to my right. I do want to open up the floor to the public to go ahead and come up with some questions. Do we have any questions at this time? Please, the floor is yours, sir.
Hello, my name is Danny Hickey. I lived in Geneva my entire life, and I've been associated with the police department for a long time towing. I just want to compliment Mr. Eveland. He did one hell of a job when he got thrown in the barrel of fire here, taking over. He did a great job. The guys all love him, they respect him, and he loves Geneva. He's a good man.
Kudos. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Please. Yeah, please. Excuse me.
Hi, I'm Amara Sully-Dingle. I'm a member of the Police Budget Advisory Board. As Lieutenant Eveland knows, our group, as a city board, has been doing some exploration regarding new models for improving mental health responses in law enforcement. So Lieutenant Eveland was one of our guests, but we've had other guests, including Lieutenant Green from the Ontario County Sheriff's Office, who's leading the effort to develop the behavioral intervention team in Ontario County. And so we're interested in seeing if the city can implement a model where a trained mental health professional, a civilian, would be available along with uniformed officers to respond to mental health calls. This is something that's being explored around the country as a better way to respond to mental health calls. So Lieutenant Eveland, we have had a conversation in another forum, but I'm interested in having your thoughts about, do you see a future, do you think this would be something that would be beneficial to law enforcement and to the community to have some kind of model, obviously understanding budgetary restrictions, and this would have to be a long-term effort?
Yeah, so just to, I guess, maybe share some knowledge with everybody here that might not be familiar with what a behavioral intervention team is. After the shooting in Buffalo at the Top supermarket, they developed this model, essentially getting all these stakeholders together, whether it's social workers, people in the schools, law enforcement, and getting these thoughts collectively and figure out how we can help somebody that might be having a mental health crisis. I'm very kind of excited that you asked me that question because unfortunately our meeting got postponed. That was upcoming. I do have something in the works with that. I am working closely with an agency right now, or an organization that is local. I don't want to name them just yet because we're very early in the conversations. However, there is a grant that is being applied for in which we're hoping to have a bachelor degree social worker that is going to be working out of the police department as a hub, and they would be assisting us with these cases to offer assistance, whether it's a mental health issue, an overdose issue, a domestic violence issue, and be able to provide the services way beyond our capabilities. So this is something that we are looking at, and I'm kind of excited for it because I think that if we see a success with this program, that's going to maybe something we can present to the city to possibly get something long-term.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please.
Hi, I'm Michael Salato. I've been living in Geneva for the last 7 years and change. What I would like to say is I've been very grateful for the amount of events and under your leadership in regards to building that community engagement and repairing that relationship. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of the things that you have been doing as well as any plans that you have going forward in terms of building that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did recently form a community engagement team. It is being led by Sergeant Buckland right now. What we're hoping to do is possibly a bi-monthly, something to get involved in the community. We did the Coffee with a Cop, which I think is great. That really does help bridge that gap and kind of have those offline conversations in a more formal manner with no agenda. Just recently, this past Saturday, actually, I had the opportunity to go to the Church of Latter-Rain on Preemption Street, and I was a barbecue judge. But I met some wonderful people that I've never met before. And I think that's what it's all about, is getting out there in the community and showing everybody that we're here, we care about, the citizens here, and we want to be involved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else at this time?
Hello everyone, Manuel Santiago, resident here in Geneva for the last 4 years, and I am very grateful that I moved here to Geneva. I had lived in 25 years in Puerto Rico. I'm Puerto Rican. If you guys don't don't believe it or not, it's okay. Puerto Rican albino, that's fine. So. And I was very grateful, and I'm very thankful of how the Geneva PD has dealt with some of the calls that they have to respond very quickly, very politely, and especially in our school district, the president of our SRO. And I am very grateful of your commitment to enhance the presence of SROs in our school district, not only for that vision that you have said about creating that relationship with the students, that the students will have a very positive vision of the people on uniform, but also for the safety of our children and the staff in the schools that really we needed in this paramount moments of uncertainty. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessica Farrell. Okay. My question, what I would ask now is, what do you perceive to be the three biggest challenges currently facing the GPD, and how would you work to address them? And I know you were able to mention a couple in some of your earlier answers, but just a chance to really talk about your visions for the department and some challenges that you recognize that we have, but how you'd like to address them and your ideas for that.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I think one of the biggest challenges is recruitment and retention. Now, I have touched on that we have hired 4 people this past year that are currently in the academy, 2 of which are in here today. We're very excited. They're going to be out on the road training July 21st. Now, we've done the recruitment part. Now, I think it's very important to retain these individuals because obviously it is not cheap to hire a police officer and also put them through the training. I think another issue that we're going to have, or that we're seeing right now, is we've had a big shift in turnover. We had a lot of experience walk out of our doors. Currently, right now, we have 13 road patrol officers with under 5 years experience. So I think it's very, very important for us to get those officers trained up so that way they're providing the best quality of services to Geneva. And thirdly, I would probably say budget. You know, it's all about money, and it's not cheap to run a police department. One thing I've been doing with this is really trying to think outside the box and find different grant opportunities. There's so much state money out there and federal money. You just got to find it and apply for that. So the 2 things that I'm doing to combat that right now is one is our record management system. It's extremely antiquated. We've had the same record management system since 2004. And what that does is that collects we use the Uniform Crime Report to submit our data to the FBI. And we're looking at updating our RMS system, which will then use the NIBRS, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. This helps open up the doors to more federal funding. Most recently, I did put in an application this past fall for some state funding, and we were awarded $380,000 to advance some technological upgrades. That way it does not burden the taxpayers. That's something I'm pretty proud of, and that's something I want to continue looking at year after year.
That's
Great.
huge. Repeat that.
So there was a grant opportunity this past fall called the LE Tech Grant, and the City of Geneva was awarded $380,000. It is very specific the way it's written. It has to be technology-based, where you coordinate with the Fusion Center. Our local Fusion Center is the Monroe County Crime Analysis Center. It's essentially a brain for the local law enforcement agencies around here to get information quickly and to share that information as well. And then also the equipment has to be technology-based, and it has to be made in the United States. So there are some strict limitations to it, but we are looking at bringing some programs such as a drone program to Geneva, which would be extremely helpful for search and rescue attempts or fleeing people, things like that. Surveillance, security measures for cruise at night, where we get a lot of large gathering down in the city. And then we're looking at some other additional upgrades as well with that.
What else?
No, thank you. That's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Oh, I thought you had more questions. I'm sorry. No, you're fine. You're fine.
Thank you.
What else?
Hi, I'm Lucille Mallard, and my question is probably different than others. The summer is coming. Kids will be out of school. Lots of kids will be hanging out on the street, raise the age for the arrest. What are some of the strategies you plan to put in place to prevent young people from being arrested or harassed by police officers?
Well, I think the biggest hurdle with that is establishing that trust. I think having the extra SRO position is going to be huge for us. And the reason I say that, I spent the majority of my career on night shift, and I have had to try to corral some young kids and bring them home because they're doing things they shouldn't be doing late at night. And I was sometimes met with resistance. And every time I had a SRO, Officer Steve, for example, they immediately knew who he was, and the situation was resolved, and we got the person home, and nobody was hurt, nobody was in trouble or anything like that. So to expand on that, I think just having our officers really engaged with the community, so that way the community knows who we are, I think that's going to be the most important thing.
So do I. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What else? What other questions?
Stacy Lambert with Ontario County. My question for you is more related to staff. How will you or how do you motivate or inspire your staff in complex or challenging situations?
I think motivating them is important, and offering that reassurance, providing them the training. You know, like I said, Geneva, we're so small and we're so intimate, and you find those officers that have certain career goals and their strengths, and really expanding on that, I've seen has been a great motivator. And then also, I think just recognition, people like that. And if you go to work day in and day out, and you work hard, and you're never ever recognized, I think your quality of service starts to dissipate. So that's one thing. Me in my lieutenant role, if I see an officer doing a good deed, I try to commend them on that and let them know, hey, you're above the bar, keep it up.
Thank you.
As you can see, I'm the person who used to be a journalist and now I'm a lawyer, so you never just ask one question. You were a candidate last year for chief. Where do you think, can you talk about like what your growth has been in the past year? What makes you a stronger candidate or a different candidate this time around than a year ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think last year, if you look at me interviewing for the chief position, my biggest, I don't want to say it's a fault, but my lack of experience was just more the administrative side. Since then, I became a lieutenant. I oversee the majority of the administrative functions of the police department. I handle the scheduling. I handle the payroll. I am the events coordinator. I am the training officer, which means I have to make sure we're meeting all of our contractual obligations. I also meet the state accreditation requirements. I am the department quartermaster. I was the fleet manager. So I had my hands in many, many different pots over the last almost year now. And then also the experiences that I gained back in January. I was working that full-time lieutenant's office, and for the last 4 to 5 months, I've been working as the acting chief of police, and now I'm helping Chief Passalacqua since he's been back. So I think that's where a lot of my growth has come, is the leadership growth and the administrative growth of the department.
Kudos. Any other questions, comments, or concerns at this time? Okay. As you are fully aware, there are 4 variables that have severely impacted law enforcement, I would say nationally. Those 4 variables include the following. Post-2020, there's been a mass exodus of law enforcement professionals across the country. The second variable would be the deterioration of new recruits. And when I say deterioration, I mean 2 things. Sometimes that pertains to quality of recruits as well as numbers of new recruits. The third variable would be bail reform. And the 4th variable would be raised age. For a variety of reasons, these 4 variables have had an impact on law enforcement, including morale within the agency. As the chief of police, what are some things you think you can do to address the morale and how those 4 variables are impacting officers under your leadership?
Well, to speak on raise the age and the bail reform, unfortunately, the police departments weren't really at the table for those discussions. The way I look at it is we have a job to do. What happens after that, that's out of our control, unfortunately. But as far as the other comments that you had mentioned, Dr. Sim, I think we're starting to see a pendulum shift a little bit as far as the number of applicants and the quality of applicants. For the past few years, not many people wanted to get into law enforcement. We were highly scrutinized nationally and locally, and it was tough. It was very, very tough. We created a new recruitment team last year that's been very active. One thing that we did that's different than any other agency around here is, so when you want to be a police officer, you have to take a civil service test. You have to score in a certain level to get canvassed. After you get canvassed, you'd be invited to a physical agility test. Oftentimes, if you fail that test, you have, I think it's 30 days to retest. If you don't pass that, you're done. You're off the list. One thing that we did for recruitment is we invited our candidates to do practice PT tests prior to their official one. And we had great responses. A lot of our recruits were working together. They had running clubs on the weekends to train for their official agility test. and it really brought people together before they were even hired by the police department. But more importantly, it gave these recruits or these possible candidates an opportunity to identify where they were weak in their physical agility test. So when it came time to it, they all passed.
Kudos. Sometimes when law enforcement professionals have to do their job, a point of contention can be the relationship between the law enforcement agency and city council. With that being said, as chief of police, what are some things you think you can put in place in order to establish a good relationship between law enforcement and public officials?
Well, in my lieutenant role, and if I ever become a chief of police, I have an open door policy. I think the biggest thing is communication and education. If there's ever been an issue with the way we handle things or the way something was done, I've always had an open door policy, and I'm always open to explain why we do things. And with that, I'm also open to receive feedback. Sometimes the police, we might not do things the best way, and sometimes complaints or comments can lead to policy changes and essentially have us be a more effective police department. That's how changes get made. So I think having that open communication is important with anybody, whether it's council or any other city staff member.
Kudos. I want to open up the floor again. We have some time, so I want to open up the floor again, please.
So I have a question that I feel like actually kind of builds on what you ended with that question. So this idea of community policing has gained a lot of traction in recent years and has a lot of different iterations and ways that it works. And so I was wondering, as chief, how you would facilitate ways for the Geneva community, not just get to know officers, obviously that's very important, I feel like we've covered that, but give the Geneva community a chance to give the department feedback and give input into the department's policies. How would you facilitate that type of community involvement specifically?
Well, one thing I just implemented was a way for officers to provide information to the public. So it's essentially looks like a business card, but it's got some QR codes on there. And on the back of that, what the QR codes have, it has a one QR code for Ontario County list of resources. And then also there's another one that goes to the Geneva Police Department website. I think this is important because now it's hand giving somebody, the member of the public, ways and tools to contact us. And again, we do have an online submission where you can put in complaints or ideas. So yeah, I mean, our policy is also listed on the police department as well. So if a member had a question or saw something that a different agency did that we don't do, and they had a suggestion, it's always good to get feedback.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open up the floor one more time. Or is there any other questions, comments, or concerns at this time? I'm going to make sure that you have the last word. So as a facilitator for tonight's event, I do want to thank you all for showing up, right? This is a very important role here in the city of Geneva. And I'm very happy to see that citizens have showed up to be proactive. We even have, as you already mentioned, some individuals who are in the current law enforcement academy because they understand the importance of this role. For the good of the order, what is the last thing that you would like to share tonight?
I'm just very appreciative, to be honest. I'm very happy that this many people came out. I was a little curious of how this process was going to work. I actually thought it was going to be in the Teams room. I was like, oh man, are we not expecting a large audience? So I thank everybody for coming out this evening. This obviously is a very important decision for the city, and I'm very happy and blessed to be a candidate for this position.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What time's the next? 6:30. The next one's at 6:30. Stretch your legs. Call your significant other. Go get something to drink. Do your thing. All right, good evening, everyone. For those of you who have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Dr. Sim Covington, and I'm going to be facilitating tonight's discussion. Very quickly, I just have to go over some housekeeping rules in regards to the level of engagement that we're going to have here tonight. It is politely requested that all persons attending this evening's forum adhere to the following standards of conduct. Please treat everyone courteously. Let's operate with dignity and respect when listening to others. Let's exercise self-control and avoid threats of violence and loud, insulting, demeaning, or offensive communications. Let's give an open mind to considerations of all viewpoints. Let's focus on the issue and avoid personalizing the discussion. Allow others to speak without intimidation or interruption. And please embrace respectful disagreement and dissent as a democratic right that are inherent components of an inclusive process and tools for forging sound decisions. So I have a variety of questions here that I'm going to ask our wonderful candidate. When I ask you your first question, please be sure to state your full name just for verification for the audience members. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, can you please tell us about yourself and why you believe you would make a good chief of police for the city of Geneva? What exactly is your vision when it comes to serving in this critical role?
First of all, thank you, everybody, for being here. I think participation in local government is important, and everybody here is participating, which is good. My name is James Chechak. Currently the chief of police in the village of Waterloo, right across the border into Seneca County. I live in Canandaigua with my wife and 2 kids, my 2 daughters. I also have a son who lives with his mother in Buffalo. He's 16, and my daughters are 1 and 2. So I have hobbies, but I can tell you outside of work, I'm pretty much just dad. So I like to fish and golf. I have experience in the military. That's how I started my career. I was initially interested in law enforcement because I have family members that were in it. I enlisted in the Army National Guard. I was military police for 13 years. Luckily, I was National Guard, so being part-time, I was able to pursue this as a civilian career as well. While in the National Guard, I had the privilege of doing law enforcement functions across the world. I did in the U.S. Virgin Islands for storm relief, Long Island, worked with Border Patrol on the southwest border in Arizona. I also deployed to Iraq in 2011, where we escorted police advisory teams to local Iraqi police stations and assisted them, to the best of our abilities in that environment. I went to the academy in 2008. I was initially hired with the Seneca County Sheriff's Office as a part-time officer. It was a struggle back then. It was very competitive. I actually paid my way through the academy and was unpaid while there. I then worked with the Waterloo Police Department starting part-time in 2009. After my deployment to Iraq, I came back and was given a full-time position in Seneca Falls. And then eventually Waterloo had an opening because that's where I wanted to be, and I was hired full-time there in 2012. I took a supervisory role as a sergeant in 2017, and that's where I really invested in my career. I decided to get out of the National Guard, and I pursued a lot of training to better myself, and in turn, better the officers that worked for me. Being an instructor, a field training officer, has really helped me invest myself into law enforcement. And I take pride in teaching. I think that's a great role and improves the community. Why I think I'd be a good fit for this job? Well, I'm currently a chief of police. I mean, I know the job pretty well. I had to learn quickly and suddenly. There wasn't an expected retirement of the prior chief. I went through a lot of things in the first year and a half that a lot of department heads may not go through at all. Through an attorney general's investigation into fatality, ended up, so the attorney general's office will investigate if they suspect that a police action caused the death. It ended up being a vehicle that ran from an officer who never initiated pursuit, but because it was related to law enforcement action, I went through that investigation. I learned a lot. a fatality review with the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence for a domestic violence case that led to an unfortunate death. That was a learning experience and allowed me to really improve my knowledge of how we can respond to domestic violence. So I do have a lot of experience in the short year and a half that I have been chief, and I'm ready to grow professionally. I can't grow any further where I'm at now. I know a lot of the members of this community because I do work right next door. We're very similar, and I think that I can do a good job for the Geneva Police Department and the Geneva community.
Kudos. In times of crisis, communication skills are paramount to effective crisis management. Therefore, what skills and best practices have you utilized and can bring to the role of Chief of Police?
In a crisis, the most important thing, obviously, is to stay calm. I have a lot of experience in very stressful situations in different environments, and I'm able to stay calm and sometimes just put on the listening ears until that person or group of people in crisis feel they've been heard and are able to de-escalate. We hear the term de-escalation in law enforcement a lot, and a lot of that is just giving somebody the time to deliver that message that they have. And that can work in the workplace as well. If there's an employee that feels that something's not going as it should, sometimes you just need to sit there and listen to them. And then when it's your time to speak, calmly explain to them, there's certain procedures. If it's somebody violated the law, explain to them what that law is, how did they violate it, and same with employee issues. Give them the opportunity to speak, and then give them your point of view, and explain to them what's going on, and that will usually you'll find a good result in that situation.
With social justice and activism continuing to be areas of concerns across the country, what systems do you believe are needed in order to support matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What practices do you hope to incorporate to combat bias inside and outside of the Geneva Police Department?
As I mentioned earlier today, training about implicit bias that luckily I was able to receive from you years ago. Recognize that biases do exist. Everybody has them, and the only way you can confront it is if you recognize that. We need to put ourselves in situations where we're interacting with people that may not have the same background, may not have the same beliefs as us, or may not be the same race or ethnicity. And we need to engage with those people and break down those walls. And that will lead to those social issues coming up. You got to open that conversation with people with the different beliefs, and maybe you together can work towards resolutions to that.
Can you please describe your leadership style? How would you promote a professional image of the Geneva Police Department to the greater community? And what is your experience managing dissension and morale issues within the department?
My leadership style, I like to be present, but not overbearing. I don't like to micromanage, and people don't like to be micromanaged. If they're doing the right thing, good job, keep doing it. Do you need any help? I'm not going to tell them how to do it if they're already doing it the right way. I always have an open door, even if it's to come in and have a cup of coffee, tell me about your day. And that goes with anybody from the community, not just officers that work for me. But there's also a culture of accountability. It's important that officers remain accountable. We have set standards. I come from an accredited agency. Geneva Police Department's an accredited agency, so we work off of best practices set by the state. And it's important to hold people to that standard. If we're expected to hold the public, to the laws set by the state and ultimately the citizens, then we should do the same as a department. So I think that's important as well. Was there a third part? Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem. What practices do you hope to incorporate to combat bias inside and outside of the department?
I have some experience with some dissent inside the department. One example I used earlier today is scheduling, which is important because that affects home life, right? So your work-life balance. And I told the officers, I said, hey, sit down. I said, we'll come together as a group. We have to meet certain criteria, right? We have to provide adequate public safety. We need certain coverage at certain hours. And we need a schedule that if somebody calls in sick, we have to be able to fill that shift. So I set some criteria, and I said, let's come up with some schedules. We'll decide as a group, and that squashed it. Including them in some decision making is important because I may not see it from their point of view because ultimately I'm not working that. I'm not working that tough schedule, that tough shift work anymore. And sometimes I need to be reminded where I came from, where I started, and how hard it really is. So.
Promoting community standards, and in particular civility, continues to be important when it comes to public safety. As Chief of Police, how would you demonstrate leadership in supporting and advancing this standard, the standard of civility?
It starts from the top. We talked about accountability and holding people accountable. That doesn't mean yelling at them, right? And it's conversations. It's why is this going wrong? What can we do to improve it? Hey, there's a training coming up about this. Do you want to go to it so we can make sure this doesn't happen in the future? Interdepartmentally, I think treating everybody as an adult, as a human being, is important, and that's the same as with the public. I mean, we have to remain neutral, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, victim or suspect. Everybody needs to be treated as a citizen that has rights, and you need to make sure equality is at the forefront.
Yes. As the principal individual overseeing safety and security for the City of Geneva, what do you consider to be the most effective practices to ensure a proper balance between individual and public safety? What systems will you put in place for fair and principled policing?
So the first part, I'm sorry.
No problem.
If you could repeat it.
What do you consider to be the most effective practices to ensure a proper balance between individual rights and public safety?
Like I mentioned before, we have set standards and best practices set by the state, and making sure that we meet or exceed those policies and procedures is important, and holding people accountable, as I've said before. Also make sure we're doing right by the officers, that they're trained properly. And, they know what constitutional rights are, and they know how in the job to effectively protect that. And if I could get the second part again, I'm sorry, I should have a pen and paper to write it down.
You're absolutely fine. What systems do you plan to put in place for fair and principled policing?
I would build on what's already in place. I know there's already good policies and procedures. I think that we could always do better with what they call procedural justice, and that's not just listening to a victim, but make sure you're listening to the suspect and why did they do whatever it is that was done. If they're going through hardships, do they need to seek treatment? We offer services to victims. We need to make sure that we're offering services to the other side as well. And we need to treat everybody equally. We need to try to improve society no matter what side of the law that person is on. If we can improve their quality of life, then eventually we'll see a reduction in crime, which is a tough ask, I will say.
Yes.
But
is there any final thought you would like to share regarding your candidacy for Chief of Police for the City of Geneva? Before you answer, a lot of times when people are interviewing, later on they go home. So later on when you go to speak to your wife and you're having the conversation, you're like, man, I forgot to tell them, blah, 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 right? So we want to make sure that we have the floor open for you to think about. Is there anything that you want to make sure that you put across to the citizens of Geneva, either here in person or virtually, relevant to your candidacy for this very important role?
You know, as I told the officers early today when we met with them, I'm a worker. I'm all in. Something that I probably won't do now, but I still work road shifts periodically to make sure that my officers can go to training. We've had Memorial Day events over the weekend in Waterloo. If you were able to go, I hope you enjoyed it. But I put in a 16-hour day on Saturday and a 10-hour day on Sunday. And to be present is important. And that's not only during those events, but during the week. If the council wants to speak with me, if residents want to speak with me, you know, I'll be present. I'll be there. I'm reachable. And feel free to reach out. And that goes with after the interview. If you do have questions that I don't answer here that you think of later, let me know. You know, take my email down. I can give it to you at the end of this, and I'll do my best to answer it.
Kudos. At this time, I would like to open up the floor for questions. As I mentioned during last session, we have a podium here. And I just want to open up the floor for any questions that we may have from the studio audience.
Hello, my name is Danny Hickey. I've been in Geneva my whole entire life. I tow for the police department, so I've been 20 plus years. How many guys do you have in the Waterloo Police Department under you?
We have 7 full-time officers, and it varies, but usually 5 or 6 part-time officers.
Do you have a 24-hour shift or no?
Currently, we don't because of our staffing levels.
How would you handle the guys in 24/7 and fluctuating with college kids, probably 15,000, 14,000 people, 6 months a year? How would you handle that compared to what's in Waterloo right now?
Well, the job itself, you know, the tasks of the chief of police are the same across the board. It's more involved, right? But I have a bigger staff, and I'm not doing it alone. There's a great command staff already, great sergeants, great lieutenants, and it's a team effort. You know, I'm not doing it alone.
If you were elected to be the chief, would you move to Geneva with your family and kids?
It's a consideration. I definitely considered it. We actually, we're growing out of our home, and we might start looking, and we put that on pause for now. I've lived in the community before. I love the community, and I would definitely consider it, but I don't want to promise it.
Okay. Because I think that's very important, being a police chief in Geneva. We had prior chiefs that all lived here. Their kids all went to Geneva schools. They were in sporting and school events all together. Everybody got to know them. You know the person more that way than you do from being the police chief. I
agree, and I think it's important that if I'm going to the grocery store, it's here.
Yeah,
so
they walk in and say, "Hey, how you doing?"
Absolutely. You know, I want to. I like grabbing coffee here. I still come to eat here. You know, I live in Canandaigua, but I can tell you I'm here at least once a month.
Okay. Thank you. Good luck.
Kudos. Others? Any other questions from the audience? Please, absolutely. This is what we're here for.
Hi, I'm Michael Salato. So I like to hear your, you mentioned wanting to create a culture of accountability. So my question is, what steps have you taken in your position in Waterloo to create that culture, and what would you plan to do to help ensure there's that culture of accountability in Geneva as well?
Well, I was lucky enough that our accreditation process has started, and that's a good foundation to start on. We achieved accreditation shortly after I became chief of police, and that sets standards of if there's a complaint against an officer, you will investigate it. You know, whether it's the chief's appointee or the chief himself. I think that, you know, depends on the degree of that complaint. But you need to take every complaint and investigate it thoroughly. And it all starts, I think, with being open to the public, you know, giving them avenues that they can file a complaint that they're comfortable with. I know currently most agencies, you know, sit down and sign a sworn statement in front of a police officer. That may not be the best practice. Maybe they'd be more comfortable meeting with an HR representative at City Hall. I'm not 100% on Geneva's policies. Maybe that's an option, but be creative in ways you can be open to the public and taking those complaints.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns at this time? Questions from the audience? We have another question here.
Hello, Stacy Lambert with Ontario County. My question for you is, if you were selected for this position of Chief of Police for Geneva, how will you motivate your staff in challenging situations?
Again, something I've had experience with, and I think making them feel invested in the department, invested in the success of the department, and in the community itself is important. And there's many ways to do that, and it's officer specific. Find their niche, find what interests them. When you do yearly reviews, don't only review their performance, but ask them what is your goal? What's your career goal? What training do you want? What do you want to see improved? I think that the more invested that they feel in the department, the harder they're going to work, and the more they're going to work as a team to be successful. And training is a crucial part. Another thing you run into is junior officers may not want to go out and be proactive. They may not want to do this tough thing because they're not comfortable doing it, right? There's a lot of complex legalities. So making sure that they're equipped with the right training and tools to do the job will help as well.
Kudos. Others, please.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Jessica Farrell. I'd like to just ask, what do you perceive to be, what do you perceive to be the three biggest challenges currently facing the GPD, and how would you work to address them as chief? And I know that you're not an internal candidate, but obviously you've done your research, and so what are you looking to do? What are you looking to bring here to address some challenges we might be facing?
A lot of them are universal. So recruiting and retention is a nationwide challenge, and I know it's been a challenge here. I think that you have to be more proactive now. It used to be you had a good civil service list, and you pick candidates off of that. Now I think we need to reach out prior to. If there was interest before, take the test, right? Well, now it needs to be, if you're interested, come meet with me. Let me help you get to the point that you're passing the test, that you're physically fit, and mentor people who are interested. And seek out the people that may be interested but are on the line, and help them through that process so we can get some good quality candidates. I think it's also important to recruit local, because you're more likely to retain those people. A second challenge is mental health. And I can say on both sides, officer wellness is important. You want people to want to show up to work, and if they become upset because of shift work, an incident they dealt with, officer wellness is crucial, because their tone that they come into work with is the same one that's going to be reflected back out when they contact the public. So having peer support programs, EAP, things like that, and making sure that, hey, you've worked a ton of overtime. I'm going to turn you down for the one you put in for. I think, spend some time with family. And you need to recognize that, and that's important. And then on the other side, dealing with the public with mental health issues, we need to really push services. In Seneca County, we have a crisis response team that comes out to calls. It's great. I can't speak highly enough of it, and I'll advocate for it here, because it has prevented us from having to take people to the hospital. It gives you an on-site treatment. And not having to take somebody to the hospital could be a prevention of use of force, right? And use of force is a big issue nationally with law enforcement. So a third challenge, I will say it's going to be for me personally. I don't have the relationships that another candidate does. I don't know the community as well, but I can tell you I'm going to challenge myself to make those. I will put in the work. I'll be here, day in and day out, especially with city council, because that's where our connection with the citizens begins. But it's also important to make those connections with domestic violence advocates, mental health, substance abuse, all those things. I need to understand those services, how they work here, so that I can effectively refer people to them.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm Amaria Sully-Dingle. I'm a member of Geneva's Police Budget Advisory Board, which is a unique body that, as far as I know, at least in Ontario County, there's no other jurisdiction that has a body like that. So my first question for you, so the point of this, it's purely advisory, but we have not had a lot of attendance from a past chief. Would you commit to attending the Police Budget Advisory Board and communicating with citizens about the budgetary needs if you were selected as the candidate?
Absolutely. Police departments aren't cheap, right? I'll just put it out right. But the service we offer is invaluable. So I think it's important that the citizens understand what the cost is. It's majority payroll, but understanding that a TASER program is expensive, that the body cam program is expensive, not just because they are, but because we have to maintain that data. And the law requires that we maintain certain body cam for 25 years. So just even just as an ability to inform the public or the board of what that money is actually used for is important. It's transparent, and that's become desired, right? And I think that's important, and I would definitely attend those meetings.
So this is going to be a follow-up to your comment about mental health. So one of the things that the Police Budget Advisory Board has been researching in recent months has been how to better provide services and to recommend that only in an advisory capacity regarding mental health calls. And it seems like the preferred model from our guest speakers that we've had, including from the Ontario County Sheriff's Office, from Hobart and William Smith's Department of Public Safety, a local resident who's actually a chief engagement officer for the Ithaca College Police Department, and she's a social worker by training. The safest model is having a social worker who can be available, but that there's uniformed officers available, not sending social workers out on their own, and not just having police officers with mental health first aid training being the thing, that this is considered to be the best model. So you had mentioned talking what you've seen in Seneca County. So do you have any thoughts about how to improve responses to mental health calls, and particularly regarding the model of having a social worker respond, be available, whether it's just for that department or maybe shared with another department, along with uniformed officers?
I've seen the effects of it, and it's been great. So the crisis response team is a mental health worker that is on call 24/7, and if we feel somebody needs to be evaluated, but maybe taking them to the hospital isn't the right situation, or maybe we can prevent use of force or creating more trauma, we'll call out the crisis response team, and they're people that are able to make an evaluation, right? It's not just a standard social worker. They're mental health professionals. And most of the time, that is enough. We don't have to take it any further. And it's not just that time that they come out. They establish the connection to that resource. There's follow-ups that are conducted the following day by that response team or the county mental health department. Whether it should just be locally or county-wide, I'm all for it being county-wide, but I think those are decisions that need to be made as a collective. But I would certainly advocate for it.
This is a follow-up question for a comment you made earlier. In your opening remarks, you discussed that you'd had the experience of an investigation involving a domestic violence call, and that as a result of that, you had learned some lessons about better ways to respond to a domestic violence call. So could you talk about what it was that you learned that can improve, a law enforcement response to domestic violence calls?
So this one specifically had been a long-term, spanning several years that there was domestic violence, and it went back and forth. It wasn't just one-sided, but we learned that maybe pushing harder, I guess, with a victim to make an arrest, get an order of protection, could have changed the curve, I guess. I don't know a better way to explain it. But also that junior officers may need better training. Sometimes the academy is a good baseline, but continuing that education on mandatory arrest and some other signs that you may not have noticed that you will notice. With this training, that could be enough evidence that, hey, we can get a mandatory arrest out of this instead of saying, oh, it's them again, and file the report and move on. We need to be more engaged. We need to be more victim-centered and be more persistent and try to protect the victims.
Thank you.
Other questions, please?
Hi, I'm Lucille Mallard, and I heard a few things from you about training. Would you mandate your officers do diversity, inclusion, equity training on a regular basis, or do it once and that's it?
I guess it depends on what you mean by a regular basis. I think
basis,
it needs to be ongoing, right? It's not just a one and done. And I'm not going to say it's going to be twice a year or every year, but it should be put in a rotation. I know currently I rotate training with my officers that, we're doing CPR, AED, medical stuff this year. The certification is good for 2 years. So next year, let's find a topic where we think we're lacking, where we're not doing well, and we'll do in-service training on that. And that can certainly be part of it. We could utilize online training as well to make it easier, because it is a difficult thing to get everybody through an in-person training. There's a lot of officers, and you need to fill shifts, right? They still need to be out there working. So utilizing online training is certainly a good way that you can at least stay fresh on it.
Another question, I hear a lot about mental health and how people, the crisis intervention. What about substance abuse? A lot of people have mental health and the substance abuse problems, and would you recommend them to go to some type of treatment as well as a mental health facility?
Absolutely. They often go hand in hand, whether mental health issue causes the drug abuse or drug abuse leads to a mental health condition. They're very often affected by the same two things. And luckily through, county mental health departments, they're usually linked with the substance abuse department. And through their evaluations, they can say, okay, let's refer them on. Unfortunately, beyond the referral, right? We don't get to see the outcome. We can just put them in touch with that. But I'm confident that those mental health workers definitely recognize substance abuse and send them on to the right treatment.
I'm talking from a drug court perspective when I say this.
Oh, okay.
We're celebrating our 25th year of Ontario County Drug Court.
Right.
Police officers can refer people to drug court who get arrested for substance abuse related crimes. So would you be willing to do that instead of putting them in jail and just say, go do your time?
Absolutely. Seneca County doesn't have one anymore, but they did, and it was successful. The problem there was funding and having the appropriate caseload to continue the program. And their police officers couldn't refer it. That all the referrals came from judges or requests, from attorneys. Knowing that now, I think that's great, and definitely a good alternative to an incarceration, because our goal is rehabilitation, not incarceration.
And my last point is, what are some of the strategies that you would put in place? Because school will be out soon. Kids will be all in the streets, running up and down, causing a lot of confusion. What kind of strategies would you put in place to curtail arrests? Instead of getting kids with a criminal record, what kind of things would you do to prevent that?
Well, we're lucky enough to have a school resource officer program, and I think that gives the department the ability to identify ahead of time who are the troubled kids, and how can we reach out to parents. How can we monitor them better? Maybe it's just our approach. Instead of, hey, what are you doing? Maybe it's a, hey, how are you? And start a conversation instead of just, kicking them out. And explain to them, hey, this is somebody's property. Be respectful of it. And if we approach them with respect, not all the time, but sometimes we'll get it back and we can get through to them. I also, we've had recent problems in Waterloo with the same thing. And there's other resources. The state police offered a community impact team, they call it. And they have a combination of plainclothes and marked officers that can just create a presence and maybe deter before something happens. And sometimes you got to ask for help. There's resources out there. They're already paid for by your state taxes. It doesn't cost the city anything to bring them in. So be creative, ask for help when needed, and try to be a deterrent to prevent anything from happening in the first place. Obviously, we have staffing restrictions, but do the best you can.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Oh, there we go. Thanks. That's you.
It's okay. Hello, my name is Manuel Santiago, and I live here in Geneva for the past 4 years. Quick question. What will be the relationship that you envision, or what will be your vision of the relationship with the Geneva PD and the Geneva City School District?
That relationship is probably one of the most crucial ones to have. We can, through the SRO program specifically, but also just having officers show up for community events, speak with kids about whether it's issues with drugs, alcohol, or violence. If we can reach the youth and get through to them, we have a better chance that when they grow up, that they're going to be successful. And I think I put a lot of value in the SRO program. We're lucky to have a really great one in Waterloo. He's been doing it for 15 years now. And the communication between the school and him and myself leads to, a really great service for the kids and also for the parents. We have to work collectively with the parents, the school, and troubled kids.
How the SRO program looks like in Waterloo?
What's that?
How it looks like in Waterloo, the SRO program?
So we have one officer. He's part-time now. He was the SRO and then retired and decided to remain the SRO on a part-time basis. He's there every day of the school year, primarily in the high school and middle school complex. But he does go to, our elementary schools when needed. And he's present every day. He teaches certain topics, like I mentioned before, drug and alcohol abuse, things like that. But he's very engaged with the student body. I walked through the county fairgrounds with him once, and I don't think we made it more than 3 feet without a kid coming and talk to him, which is great. And they want to talk to him. They respect him, and they're very open. And I think that's, a great thing. They're willing to come up to him and talk to him about issues they may not want to talk to a teacher or their parents about.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns at this time? Please.
So my second question, so the idea of community policing has gained a lot of traction in recent years. It has different iterations. As chief, how would you facilitate ways for the Geneva community to not just get to know police officers, of course that's very important, but how they could give the department feedback and give input into the department's priorities and how it operates?
My understanding is there's neighborhood meetings. I think attendance there, I don't think I could make every single one of them, but having somebody there, somebody, that works that zone a lot or, is very familiar with that zone and can be accessible and able to have conversation would be important. And like I said, my door would always be open. I think that city council would be a good avenue for them to reach out if they're not comfortable talking to the police. Any way they can get their message to us, we're definitely willing to listen. And most importantly, just being out there, encouraging officers to, engaging conversation, totally unrelated to a call. Whether you're getting coffee or walking the beat downtown, stop and talk to people, and you'd be surprised at what a good morning, how are you leads to in conversation. So.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Oh, please.
Hi, my name's Todd Beaton, live here in Geneva. Just curious if you have a sense of the benefits for the city to hire outside of the current department versus hiring from within.
Hiring from outside, you definitely get a fresh look. Somebody who's not going to say that's the way we've always done it. It's going to be somebody who says, why are we doing it that way? And can we do it better? I think that's going to be the greatest thing, an outside candidate would bring. And on top of that, just, relationships won't have a precedent, right? So we can start fresh, open communication, and I hope that I'm able to provide that.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Okay. I'm going to let you have the last word for the good of the order. Is there any last thoughts you would like to share with the audience relevant to your candidacy for this very important role?
I think we covered most of it. I would just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview. Thank you for moderating. Thank you, everybody, for participating, like I said in the beginning. And like I said before, I'm a hard worker. I'm invested in whatever it is that I'm doing, and I assure you I could do a great job.
Thank you very much.
All set?
are you?
All right.
Good. Should I mention you by name?
I know your secrets, you know mine.
I know. We'll leave it at that.
So good evening, everyone. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting formally, my name is Dr. Sim Covington. I'm going to be the facilitator for tonight's forum. I have been asked to share some information relevant to rules of engagement. It is politely requested that all persons attending this evening's forum adhere to the following standards of conduct. Please treat everyone courteously. Let's operate with dignity and respect when listening to others. Let's exercise self-control and avoid threats of violence and loud, insulting, demeaning, or offensive communications. Let's give open-minded consideration to all viewpoints. Let's focus on the issues and avoid personalizing the discussion. Allow others to speak without intimidation or interruption, and let's embrace respectful disagreement and dissent as democratic rights that are inherent components of an inclusive process and tools for forging sound decisions. I have a list of questions here that I'm going to ask our third candidate. For the first question, please feel free to state your full name first and last, okay? Can you please tell us about yourself and why you believe you would make a good chief of police for the city of Geneva? What exactly is your vision when it comes to serving in this critical role?
So my full name is that on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
My full name is James Francis McCormack. There it goes. Anybody that's from Geneva knows me as Jimmer. I've had that nickname my entire life. I started out as a sheriff's deputy in Ontario County, April 14th of 1980. I worked there until March 23rd of 1985, and I made a lateral transfer to the City of Canandaigua Police Department. I worked there until September 30th of 1985, and I enrolled in the State Police Academy, spent 6 months there, graduated. Started out in Horseheads, New York, which was Zone 4 headquarters. Went through 10 weeks of training, ended up at the barracks in Dresden. Stayed there for several years. I think they moved the barracks to Dundee in '89. I was there until '92 when I transferred to Canandaigua. I became a union delegate and represented all the troopers in Troop E, which is 10 counties, probably 250 to 300 of them. And then ultimately, I ended up being the president of the State Troopers PBA from 93 to 98. So I represented 4,300 troopers statewide in contract negotiations, labor relations, etc. I came back to Troop E in 98 and went back to Dundee as a sergeant. I had made sergeant in, I think, 93. And then I was assigned as the emergency management sergeant January 2nd of 2002. I also at that time was assigned as the supervisor for the 15 troopers that we had that worked in 23 different districts as school resource officers. That program lasted about 6.5 years before they dissolved it. And then I continued in that role until I retired October 28th of 2016. And then I was offered a job at Del Lago Resort and Casino, was the VP of Security. I retired Friday afternoon, the 28th, and I went to work at Del Lago Saturday morning, the 29th. So I had 3 months between the time I got hired and the casino opening February the 1st of 17 to hire, train, write the policies and procedures. I hired 135 people in 3 months. I didn't do it by myself, believe me. I had some great support and great people helping me, but I was also in charge of coat check, I was in charge of valet, and I was in charge of our limo driver. So all told, maybe 160 people at one point. I was also responsible for the safety and security of the 1,000+ employees that worked there and the over 1 million visitors that came in every year. I stayed in that position until August 11th of 23 when I was discharged from my job there. I then worked for the Wilmerite Corporation out of Rochester. They were one of the part owners of Del Lago when they first opened. I did some consulting for them. They own a new casino in Danville, Illinois, so I went out to do an overview of their security operation. Was out there, I think, 6 different times. Presently, I'm working part-time as they don't call themselves security, they call themselves asset protection for the Wegmans Corporation. I'm actually working at the Auburn store right now. And this opportunity presented itself, so I thought, why not? I've lived here my whole life. My kids have gone to school here and were raised here. I was raised here, and I thought, why not give it a shot?
In times of crisis, communication skills are paramount to effective crisis management. Therefore, what skills and best practices have you utilized and can bring to the role of Chief of Police?
I think during a crisis, I'm probably at my best. I don't seem to flinch. I don't seem to duck under pressure. I think that's when I truly am at my best. In my side life, I've been a 47-year member of the volunteer fire department here. The last 41 as an assistant chief. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. That doesn't make me an expert at anything. But I think if you would sit me down and say, why don't you get on that computer and do like 2 hours worth of stuff, you would lose me in the first 5 minutes. My skills are not that great and it would be boring. But if there's something serious going on, that's when I'm at my best.
With social justice and activism continuing to be an area of concern across the country, what systems do you believe are needed in order to support matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, Geneva in itself is a very diverse community. As I said before, I've lived here my whole life. I went to school here, and I've been here my entire life. So training certainly is part of it, being interactive with the community. I mentioned this earlier when I met with the rank and file. When I was a young person living here, growing up, or when I was even first on the job, you had policemen that walked the beat. They would be downtown, people would see him or her, and they would have a conversation. It's easy to drive by in a patrol car and wave at somebody, but you don't have that human interaction. It's hard to dislike someone when you're talking to them face to face. It is.
What practices do you hope to incorporate to combat bias inside and outside the department?
Again, I think it's training. I think they have to be responsive, and I think the department needs to be reflective of the people that they serve.
Can you please describe your leadership style and how you would promote a professional image of the Geneva Police Department to the greater community? And what's your experience managing dissension and morale issues within the department?
As far as a public image, I got to be honest, this is the first time I shaved in a long time, where I really shaved with a razor. I'm being honest. But I think that the image that you present, if you're in uniform, I think you have to be wearing the uniform. You have to wear it correctly. You have to give that image of professionalism. I don't think you can, and believe me, my choice of uniform, if I wasn't working, would be shorts, flip-flops, and a hooded sweatshirt, but that's not how you show up as the police chief. That's not how you project that professionalism to the citizens of the community. I think you have to be a certain way. You have to act in a certain way. You have to be above the fray. And as far as the dissension amongst the ranks, I don't know, because I'm not certainly there yet. I don't know what problems that they face, but I know a lot of departments this day and age where the state police, when I took the exam to come on the job, I think 30,000 people took it. I think you'd be lucky to get 5,000 people take it now. The job is just not that attractive anymore as it once was. The retirement's different. Not that the pay's not there, but it's just not an attractive job for a young person. It's just not, because of the anti-police sentiment nationwide.
Promoting community standards, and in particular civility, continues to be important when it comes to public safety. As Chief of Police, how would you demonstrate leadership in supporting and advancing this standard?
Again, I think you lead from the front and not from the rear. You have to set that standard that you hold your officers to. You have to act in a certain way so they understand what is expected of them.
As the principal individual overseeing safety and security for the city of Geneva, what do you consider to be the most effective practices to ensure a proper balance between individual rights and public safety? What systems would you put in place for fair and principled policing?
Fair and principled policing, I think when you go to a situation, not everyone you come in contact with that has potentially done something wrong. I'm not saying that they have done something wrong. If you go to a situation and there's two different parties involved and the one party wants the other one arrested for some transgression or what they feel is a transgression, can you sort it out? Can you somehow come to an agree to disagree kind of thing? I don't think every situation that you respond to, whether as a police officer, or I say as a police officer, you don't have to make an arrest. The resolution is not always an arrest. That's not the best resolution to the situation, just not.
What are your final thoughts you would like to share regarding your candidacy for Chief of Police for the City of Geneva?
I could talk all day, and I don't know if you want to listen to me, but truly, I've lived here my whole life. And all my kids have gone to school here. I got grandkids now. I got one that's definitely going to be going to school here. The community means a lot to me. The police department means a lot to me. I think the police department got a bad rap over the last few years over stuff that happened nationwide. I'm not saying that shouldn't have happened, or that people shouldn't have been upset over events that happened elsewhere in the country. But I think the PD got a bad rap because of that. And I don't know what happened with the last chief. I have no personal information as to what transpired with the former chief, Matt Colton. As I would say about anybody, I didn't know him well enough to not like him. But obviously something happened, or I wouldn't be sitting here. And I just think that if you treat people correctly, if you talk to people, if anybody lives here, sees me in the morning, I walk my 3 Labradors through Hobart College every day. Mr. Lavin is laughing because he yells at me when he sees me. But I meet more young people, good people, walking my dogs and having a conversation than I ever would. I meet kids at the college that, like, where are you from? I'm from California. I came here because I'm on the sailing team. This young lady that just graduated, her name is Anna McBride. She's from Chicago, on the sailing team, graduated. She's going to Martha's Vineyard to teach sailing for the summer. And then she said to me, I'm going to be in the real world, and I don't know what I'm going to do at that point. But just a nice young lady. I would have never met her if I wasn't out walking those dogs.
Mm-hmm. On that note, I do want to open up the floor to the community so that we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. Once again, we have a podium to my right. I want to open up the floor. Any questions at this time?
Danny, you're smiling. Go ahead.
No, I know Jim my whole life. He's an excellent candidate for the job.
Kudos.
Thank you.
Kudos. Okay. Come on. Yeah. No, you're fine.
My name is Amara Salingo. I'm a member of the Police Budget Advisory Board. This is the loudest I got, I guess. This is the closest I got for all the times I've asked this question. So, this is an awkward question, but as a member of the community stakeholder group, it did concern me that you have been terminated from a position recently, so why should that not concern the city manager and the stakeholder group and the members of the community that are giving input on our 3 candidates?
As far as you want to know why I was terminated?
Why would the termination not be of concern for you to be hired for this position they're interviewing for?
The casino is the only casino I've ever worked in, but I was told early on, you're only as good until somebody younger, cheaper, and prettier comes along. A lot of the people...
Ladies and gentlemen, that's definitely caught bias, but I'll let you continue. I'll let you continue.
When they hire people, when they did hire people, they hire them at a very high salary. I was hired as a vice president. That title came along with my duties and responsibilities. But as time went on, the casino was sold 2 times over, and the new ownership, I can tell you that the gentleman that took my place, and I don't know him, I just know of him, his salary was half of what I was making when I left there. So, I mean, you can read into it how you want.
Okay. If instead of taking turns, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions because I think like the timing, the other ones, it's not going to be monopolizing. So on the Police Budget Advisory Board, basically the point of the board is it's completely advisory. And one of the things, I think it kind of functions as a citizens police academy where people learn about the police department. We have had a past chief who did not attend the meetings. So one of my questions is, would you be willing to attend the Police Budget Advisory Board? Because it's, doesn't really function much and very helpful in being advising anything from a citizen input if we don't actually have a dialogue with the leader of
Absolutely.
the police department.
Yeah.
One of the things that the Police Budget Advisory Board has been exploring even before I joined the board about a year ago, is looking at the issue of law enforcement response to mental health crises. And so there is a model that is being used in different parts of the country where there is a civilian mental health professional who's available to co-respond along with law enforcement officers. And my understanding is that that is in place in Seneca County. I know that there's some interest in doing this in Ontario County. So what are your thoughts about having that kind of model? And do you see that there is a need for an improvement in terms of law enforcement response to mental health calls?
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. I'm not familiar with the program in Seneca County. I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it. I don't know if Ontario County does the same thing. I don't know what's available. I truly don't. But do I think it's a great idea? Absolutely.
You mentioned your long volunteerism with the fire department. Is there any lessons learned from your volunteerism with the fire department you think that might be applicable if you were selected to be chief of the police department?
Again, I think just talking to people, just knowing people. I mean, there's probably 2/3 of the people in this room that I know or I'm familiar with. So I think that certainly helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Please.
I've known Jim for a number of years. I'm a 20-year state police investigator, 18 years at the Bureau. And I say that because uniform and Bureau sometime, but Jim was able to smooth everything over. He did a heck of a job. And I highly recommend him. He's a great guy.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you. Others? Other questions? Oh, please.
Hi, my name is RJ Raposa from here in Geneva. And I have a question. I appreciate, clearly you have close personal ties with a lot of people and walking the dog and all of that business. But I want to hear a little bit about what your approach might be and what kind of background and formal training you have in things like conflict resolution, restorative justice, conflict circles, any sort of formal training you have to de-escalate or break down folks that are in conflict.
So through my years in law enforcement, I probably have 100 college credit hours from different classes and courses that I took. We taught, they called it MOAB, which is Management of Aggressive Behavior. We taught that at the casino to our people. So it was a de-escalation technique that we used for people that had been overserved and underfunded.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. You just hadn't mentioned that so far.
Okay.
So thank you.
Great question. Others? Come on down. Price is right.
Hi, thank you so much for coming in. My name is Jessica Farrell. I'd like to ask, what do you perceive to be the 3 biggest challenges currently facing the GPD? And obviously understanding that you're looking in from the outside. So, and how would you work to address them as chief? What ideas, new ideas would you bring to the department?
So in my earlier meeting with folks from the PD, the only contact I had was I spoke to Lieutenant John Bad Savage via email. He wanted to meet up with me and just have a conversation before these meetings took place. He was the only one but we only went back and forth via email. I never actually talked to him. I took a look at their budget today online before I went to the first meeting. I can't say that I understand it totally. I know there was a study done several years ago about the number of officers versus the number of calls that they take for service. I know they have a couple in the academy, and when they come out of the academy, if they should pass the second phase, which is their field training officer program, they will be at full staff, is what I'm told. But I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. So recruitment and retention, And I think I mentioned this earlier, at any police department nowadays, it's just not an attractive job because of the anti-police sentiment and the difference in retirement. It's just not as rewarding as maybe when I started. I also think the younger generation, I don't know, and I honestly don't know if it's Gen X, Y, or Z. I couldn't tell you. But they are not, their value system is different. They don't work for just a paycheck. They look at things differently. When I first came on the job, you had to work all the overtime that was available to put food on your table, to pay bills. I think the younger generation now comes in and they want to work their 40 hours and go home. They value their time off. They don't want to be here. They don't want to be married to the job.
Great. I'm going to ask another question while I'm
the
already.
floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So the idea of community policing obviously has gained a lot of support in recent years, and a lot of departments are thinking about how to better use community policing as a tactic. As chief, how would you facilitate ways for the Geneva community to not just meet the department, which is obviously really important, but give the department feedback and to give input into the department's priorities?
Again, I think if you start out with a walking patrol, whether it be during the day or during the evening when people are out and about and people see them in a different light, many of the law enforcement interactions with citizens are negative, or they're negative in nature. Whether they go to the house to respond to a domestic incident where they have to separate mom and dad or brother and sister from whatever the issue is at hand, it's a negative interaction. So a younger person is going to see that as a negative interaction. Or they see mom or dad get pulled over for a simple speeding ticket, didn't use, or maybe they're on their cell phone, something like that, where a ticket is issued. A younger person is going to see that. So you have to change that perception of what the police are. They're human beings and they're out there doing their job. So I think the SRO program in general is where it starts. It starts at the younger level, and then they have a different outlook on police. You develop a rapport with these younger people. They're more apt to come forward with information. They're more apt to talk to. They're going to know you. They're going to interact with you. And I think those are the successes to start with.
Absolutely. So those are my questions I came in with. I did want to ask one more thing from your interview tonight. First, I wanted to say your knowledge of dates is incredible. Your ability to say when you were hired and moved up. Can't tell you what today is, and very impressive. I wanted to ask about your experience moving from policing to then being at the casino and working with the public in a very different role, in a different capacity, and how that would impact you as you moved back into a police chief role, thinking about, in the private sector, the customer's always right, and that kind of motto, I'm assuming.
Oh, very much so.
Exactly.
It's a hospitality industry. It's
Absolutely.
not that the customer's always right, but we at the casino, we're only successful if people come through the door and spend money. So the security officers were stationed at a podium at every entrance. If you've ever been there, the first person you see when you come in the door and the last person you see when you exit is a security officer. So if they're engaging, and I'm not saying you have to talk someone's ear up, but if they just smile and say hello or good afternoon or how are you, that kind of interaction puts them at ease. I think the hospitality industry plays into the police because, once again, if you talk to people, if you have a conversation with them, it's much easier to get a perception of what that person's thinking or how they feel about whatever the situation is at hand. It could be something as innocuous as just walking down the street and saying hi. But I think that's where that community policing starts.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Questions, comments, or concerns of the police?
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Michael Salato. So you mentioned some extensive experience in leadership in a police union. So my question is along the lines of, would you mind speaking about what that experience is like, and how would you balance the needs of your officers and the requests through the union, as well as if there's any conflict between their requests, like the union requests, and city requests, whether it's from our city manager or city council?
Well, the union serves a very important purpose. The Taylor Law bounds public employees from striking. So the union negotiates benefits on the members' behalf. They negotiate vacation time, health insurance benefits, things of that nature. But obviously, it's a 24/7 job. Somebody has to work. Not everybody can have Christmas Day off. But I think from my perspective in the union, I haven't read Geneva's union contract, but I have no problem operating within the guidelines of their union contract. And if directed by city council or the city manager to institute a new policy or procedure in place, as long as it's not in violation of that contract, I have no issues with that whatsoever. From my time at the casino, there's a very active union, the Hotel Trades Council out of New York City. They could be very adversarial, and I dealt with them quite a bit, and I had a great rapport with them. Not that we agreed all the time on things of that issue, but the contract is there, it's in black and white, and as long as you stay within the confines of the contract, you won't have a problem. You're welcome.
Anyone else at this time? I want to make sure that you have. Oh, I'm sorry.
Lucille?
I didn't see you, Lucille. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Lucille Mallard, and my friends over there asked me to come up and ask questions again. And one of the questions that I asked before is, summer is coming, school will be out, lots of young people will be up and down the street causing disturbance, or maybe not, over at the Boys and Girls Club doing the things they need to be doing, but there are going to be kids up and down the streets. What are some of the strategies that you plan or might put in place to de-escalate or curtain tell kids being arrested, you know? And sometimes they make complaints saying police officers are harassing them, and that's the reason they're acting up.
Yeah, I think I said earlier, I don't think every situation needs a person needs to be arrested. I just don't think they should. It doesn't solve the situation. Kids in general are just that. They're kids. They're a product of their environment. They're a product of their home environment. So the day that school ends, I mean, there's a lot of downtime for kids where they used to be regimented and they're going to school at a certain time and they can get breakfast and lunch. They don't have that. They don't have, so I can't tell you what the outreach is, but I know that at least I've seen Raul at the Boys and Girls Club over the summer. I don't know how the police department, if they redeploy the SROs during the summer, if they put them back on the road, or if they're available for those kids. I don't. Chris, you're nodding your head. Is that? They work closely with them. I just think, I know, I am going to embarrass my son Kyle because I'm sure he's watching, but he was the kid that never wanted to be in school, and the first day school was ended, he called me at work and said, I'm bored, I got nothing to do. So it truly is. There's got to be something to do. I know when I was a kid, we hung out at Jefferson Playground, 50, 60, 70 kids at once. The city doesn't have that anymore. So the Boys and Girls Club is certainly an outlet, but there has to be something for those kids to do.
Mm-hmm. Another question, when you talked about community policing, you said you are from Geneva, and so you're familiar with Geneva. And I'm thinking about courtyard apartments, and lots of people know about courtyard apartments. Would you be willing to have your officers even do community policing in that area?
Absolutely.
Ward,
Absolutely.
Ward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And not go in just because there's some incident that occurred that made them have to go and respond to.
Right. In other words, the officers have to be proactive, not reactive.
Okay.
And I'm very familiar with Courtyard. I'm actually, I didn't mention that earlier, but I'm on the board at the Housing Authority, so I'm very familiar with what goes on at Courtyard.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody this time. Are there any more questions? Okay, here we go. Come on.
Sorry, I forgot to ask this the last time. So I have a friend in law enforcement, and she reflected to me that being a state police trooper or being a state police officer is a very different type of law enforcement agency, just the nature of the state police versus a municipal city police department that's focused on one locality. So in knowing the differences, since your law enforcement background is with the state police, what would you need to do to adjust in terms of like your prior experience, to be serving one community versus like the state police, that's covering like it's a larger geographic area. It's just a different mandate for law enforcement.
I think policing is policing. Certainly city policing is different because everybody's in a, confined area. Where I worked, we were in the rural areas of the state. And I said this many times, where you would respond to a residence in, say, Yates or Schuyler County. That's primarily the area they worked. It was you. You were the only officer there. If you were riding at night, there might be two of you there. But that was it for the next 40 or 50 miles. So you had to go in there with the mindset to be able to handle that incident on your own. If you call 911 here in the city, chances are that there's going to be 2 or 3 cars there in a short period of time. It may take you as a trooper 30 minutes to get to where you're going. So in the rural areas, not that certainly people don't have guns in Geneva. I know there was an incident last night. I'm not 100% familiar with what happened, but I know there was a fire call at 4:30 in the morning for a gunshot wound on Genesee Street. So it's certainly there. It's prevalent. It's in the community. But people in the rural areas generally have guns to begin with. So when you respond there, you also have to keep that in the back of your mind. You just do. I've worked... There isn't any place I haven't worked, all over the state. I was sent on every big detail that there was. I went to New York City in the afternoon of 9/11. I spent 2 weeks down there initially. I was down there 5 times after that. I went to New Orleans after the hurricane and spent 2 weeks down there. I was on the Bucky Phillips escape detail, the Dannemora escape detail. There's not a lot that I haven't done. That doesn't make me an expert on Geneva policing. But again, I would just fall back on the fact that I've lived here my whole life.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Any other final questions or concerns that you would like to express at this time? I want to make sure that you have the last word. Is there anything else you would like to say for the good of the order, sir?
I would like to say thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to me. And I appreciate whatever support. I'm more than willing and able to do this job. I will do it to the best of my ability if given the chance, and I won't let you down. And my wife said to make sure I said to you, Doctor, roll tide.
Roll tide. I just graduated from Alabama. Roll tide. Alabama fans.
My youngest was at freshman orientation the last 2 days in Tuscaloosa. Actually came home early last night so I could attend these today. And
is he watching?
I think they're flying right now.
Oh God! Okay.
I can't say that he's watching.
Well, it's going to be recorded on Geneva's YouTube. So
I'm sure he'll critique every
roll tide, sir.
point of it. So
okay. All right. Thank you very much.